Hello and welcome back to my kitchen. I'm Brandy. We're here at Brown Acre Farm. It has been a while. Life has been a little crazy. Surprise. I am 34 weeks pregnant. So that's kind of where we've been. I've been busy growing baby. Our pregnancy has been really high risk. I had a second trimester loss with my last pregnancy. So there has been a lot of medical work to maintain this pregnancy and keep our baby boy growing and healthy for as long as possible, which thankfully has been pretty successful as we're now nearing full term and he is still doing really well and cooking. But I've had some bed rest and lots of procedures and appointments and things, so there just has not been time for YouTube. We have just been pretty much surviving and doing our best to get through a hard, anxiety-ridden pregnancy the best way that we were able to, but we're so excited to bring home our baby boy here in a few weeks. And I'm finally, now that we're kind of here at the end and it's getting really real that we're having a baby, I need to do some prepping and some freezer meal prepping. So that's what I'm gonna do today today, this video is actually probably gonna be filmed over a couple different days because pregnant, tired, I can only just be on my feet for so long and I only like spending just so much time in the kitchen. So I'm gonna get some freezer meals prepped for postpartum, breakfasts, some dinners, just some things to have on hand to make our life easier so we're not totally relying on fast food or trying to cook with a newborn in the house. So that's what I'm working on today. Another thing, you might notice that our kitchen looks a little bit different. So we finished up the last little step of our kitchen renovation. We have been renovating our kitchen since we moved into our house in 2020, but for budgetary reasons and also just time and energy, we kind of did it in phases. So we did little pieces and parts. I painted the cabinets one year, we did something else another year, and just kind of slowly made our way through the process. We're finally done. And it feels amazing. We really wanted to wrap this up before baby got here, so we cranked out this project this fall. Well, my husband and some other family members. I did very little. But we have all new countertops. We did butcher block. We absolutely love them. The new beautiful big farmhouse sink that's one basin, white. Absolutely love it. We got new appliances. I have this lower profile microwave, which gives me so much more cooking space above the stove, which I absolutely love. New stove, new dishwasher, and then my husband tiled a beautiful backsplash, and our island top is also new to match the butcher block over here. You can just only see a little corner of it. So we are super, super excited to have this kitchen complete, to have this baby on board, and I at least wanted to get one more video out, hopefully before baby gets here, and let you know where we've been and what we've been up to. So follow along for some freezer postpartum meal preparation, inspiration, ideas, and yeah, that's what I've got for you today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. Sorry it's been so long.
So I got started with some breakfast items. So I wanted to have some muffins on hand because, one, I love muffins. They're as much a healthy kind of breakfast item as they are a treat, for me at least. I try to make them as healthy as possible, but I also make them taste good, which makes me actually want to eat them. So I have two kind of tried and true muffin recipes that I use pretty regularly. One of them is kind of like a carrot cake muffin, and then the second one I'm going to do is like a pumpkin chocolate chip muffin. So I started off with the carrot cake. I used fresh carrots. Sometimes I use pre-shredded. This time I had full carrots in my fridge, so that's what I used. So I peeled them, washed them. I'm going to cut them up, and then I'm going to shred them. Well, not necessarily shred. I use my food processor to be a little bit lazy, so they aren't actually in like slivers like a shredded carrot would be, but they end up kind of in little like carrot crumbles. It operates completely and totally the same way. It does not affect the recipe at all. Maybe affects the texture just a little bit. So if you're someone who kind of has texture issues or that is something that you're concerned about, I would suggest either using pre-shredded or shredding them yourself. But if you're a little bit lazy like I am and you want to cheat with the food processor, and texture is not really an issue for you in a muffin like this, this works really well. So I just do a little bit in the food processor at a time, pulse them up, and you'll see I kind of get like little carrot, I'll call them carrot crumbles, to then use in the muffin recipe. It works out totally fine and saves me a ton of time by not having to shred all of these, because I don't have a faster shredding apparatus than if I was just to do it by hand, which takes absolutely forever, and I'm not interested in that. This recipe also, I use whole wheat, so it adds a little bit more fiber, a little bit healthier than using a refined white wheat or a refined white flour. The whole wheat does give it maybe a little bit more of a grainy texture. Again, not something that bothers me. My husband doesn't love these, but you know, make that judgment call on your own. They would also probably be totally fine with regular flour as well. Some salt, baking soda, kind of normal ingredients for a muffin going in. Use some seasoning. It's ginger and cinnamon that goes in there. I measure with my heart, not necessarily with a measuring spoon when it comes to spices. I will also post this recipe, or as close to this recipe as possible, down in the description box. I use coconut oil in this, which is again a healthier fat to use, but because it's winter here in Ohio, my coconut oil is solid, so I have to break it up in the microwave, which means guessing how much goes in the little container and if it will be the right amount once it's melted, which is always an adventure. Hopefully I got it right this time. I think I did. In with the coconut oil. Brown sugar. Not healthy, but delicious, so, you know, you do what you do. This is a little trick. So I'm using the same container that I used the coconut oil for my honey, which I love to use honey in baking recipes. It's a healthier sweetener, and I just love the taste of honey. But if you put the honey in after the coconut oil, which my honey's hard, so I had a hard time getting it out of there, but still, any kind of honey, if it's a little bit crystallized or completely smooth, if you put it in after an oil like coconut oil, it's going to come out of this container so much easier than if you just put the honey into a dry, clean measuring spoon, measuring cup, whatever. You're going to see how much easier it kind of like comes out of that little bowl compared to the way maybe honey normally comes out. And you also don't leave as much honey in the measuring container as you would otherwise. So great little trick, highly suggest. And then also you don't do quite as many dishes because you're able to double use an item. Mix all of this up. Pretty easy, pretty basic. This recipe really isn't difficult at all, or at least I don't think so. And I do love the final product. If you love carrot cake, you will love these muffins. Got some farm fresh eggs. We finally have laying chickens again. We did a chicken swap over of our flock over the last couple months. We got rid of our older laying hens and rehomed them to someone and got newer laying hens, and they're finally laying regularly, which is amazing. I'm using applesauce also in this recipe, which is another kind of healthy binder to use in there. A little bit of milk. And I reuse, especially on a big cooking day like this, I try to reuse a lot of the same measuring utensils where possible. And with my carrot crumbles, get her all mixed together. The last thing that goes in is some oats, which is actually extra good as I'll be postpartum and hopefully breastfeeding, and oats are supposed to be really good for milk production. For the same reason, I'm adding just a little bit of flaxseed because that's also supposed to be very good for milk production. And it is my plan to breastfeed, pump somehow. I'd like to feed this baby that way, but a fed baby is the best kind of baby, so I'm not going to get too hung up on anything. I added in some vanilla and a little bit more applesauce because it was just a little bit of a dry mix as I kind of got everything pulled together. So I just wanted a little bit more liquid in there. Now I am getting my muffin tins ready. I am using some old cupcake muffin liners that are not really good shape anymore, but I really wanted to try to use them up, so I made the best of it. I won't make you watch me fight with these silly paper muffin container or muffin liners because that would be annoying, but you use what you have. I did not want them to go to waste, and they still function fine. They just might make for a slightly wonky looking muffin that's maybe not perfectly sized. My second muffin tin, I did not use those. I just sprayed it with some avocado oil. I always do that over the sink so that I don't get a slippery floor or a slippery workspace. Got those in that tin, and then all of this is gonna go in the oven. I can't remember the exact baking time off the top of my head. I think it's 20 minutes at 350, but again, I will put this recipe or the closest possible recipe that I can find in the description box. I have an old one written down. I don't honestly know where I originally pulled this recipe, and I've made a couple tweaks to it. So I'll give you the closest thing that I can find in the description box if you would like to make this yourself. On to my next round of muffins. These are going to be the pumpkin muffins that I talked about, pumpkin chocolate chip muffins. These are probably my favorite. I absolutely love pumpkin. I will eat it all year round. And it's so delicious, but you're also getting a vegetable and some really good nutrients out of that pumpkin, which is just my favorite thing ever, when I can eat something that I love and that tastes fantastic, but also is really giving you nutrients. So again, you saw the coconut oil. You see me trying to fight with the last little bit of this honey, which had gotten so crystallized and so hard. Eventually, I stopped fighting with it. I got out what I could and cracked open my new thing of honey, because sometimes you just gotta call it on the fighting with the crystallized honey. Honey is such a great way to flavor and sweeten things in a healthier way than using a white refined sugar or brown sugar or something like that. So I use it all the time in my baking. Same with maple syrup. That's also a really great one to be able to use as well. More farm fresh eggs from those wonderful chickens that have finally started laying regularly. We're getting like a good 5 eggs a day, which is fantastic. That's my little compost bucket too. So I put all of my little scraps in there, and then I'll dump that in compost later on in the day. That was my way of thawing some of the pumpkin. So this was actually a little bit of pumpkin from our garden this year. So I had processed it and put it into 1 cup servings in the freezer for exactly this purpose. I love to use the pumpkin in muffins and I have a couple other recipes that I use it in, and it's usually in 1 cup increments. So I just froze it in little baggies that way, and then I thawed it just a few minutes in some cool water, and it was perfectly ready to use. So great little trick if you have like bulk pumpkin or something that you would like to stretch over a longer period of time and aren't able to use it all at once. Again, seasoning, I believe this is pumpkin pie spice that goes in this one, which makes sense being pumpkin muffins. Baking soda, which I never thought I'd be a person who bought baking soda in bulk, but that's what being almost 30 and liking to cook from scratch does to you. Again, this is a whole wheat flour that I use in this recipe, just a little healthier, a little more fiber, and I really am just not bothered by the texture of using whole wheat flour at all, and I'll take the extra nutrients over the alternative. get it all mixed together. It's a pretty easy recipe to pull together. I think this one even comes together faster than the pumpkin muffins did. Again, oats go in this recipe, which is why this is one of the ones that I picked for postpartum and hopefully breastfeeding, because I don't know if I believe that's correct, but I feel like I hear oats are fantastic for milk production everywhere I turn as I've been doing more and more baby research. I use dark chocolate chips, which are the best kind of chocolate chips in my opinion in this. So these are pumpkin chocolate chip muffins. Absolutely delicious. You got to get some of that chocolate in there. And the dark chocolate with the pumpkin is just, I find that to be the perfect combination. While I had been making the batter for the pumpkin muffins, the carrot ones are done cooking now. So I'm going to pull those off, put them on a rack to cool, and then use the exact same muffin tins for the pumpkin muffins. Again, I'm trying to limit how many dishes that I have to do when this is all said and done and make my life a little bit easier. And it just doesn't matter at the end of the day. There's going to be paper between the muffins, so it's not like you're eating a carrot flavored pumpkin muffin or anything. But hey, that might actually be really good. Maybe someone should try that. I have my new muffin liners that are actually shaped appropriately. So this is going much easier with the pumpkin versus the wonky muffin liners that I had to use for the carrot. I do generally opt to use liners just because it's so much easier when you are baking them, getting them out of the container. And I also, with these being frozen, I think they stick together less when freezing, which is a good thing because I usually am pulling them out one or two at a time and not like thawing the whole batch, because I'm making them ahead to have them for whenever I need something quick and easy and something that I can just pull out and go that's a healthy meal, so that I'm not constantly eating junk or constantly going out to eat or getting takeout or food delivered or whatever, because one, it's not that great for you, and two, it just gets so expensive, especially in how things are right now. It's just crazy how inflation has affected everything. In the oven those go. Again, I think these are also 350 for like 25 minutes. And yeah, there are my two muffin recipes. Get those pulled out of the oven, ready to go. I just froze them in gallon freezer Ziploc bags and laid them as flat as possible until they were nice and frozen solid. And then I was able to kind of, throw them wherever made sense. But that seems to work fine. I'll eat these pretty quickly, so I'm not worried about a ton of longevity. Day 2, I got started I tried to be as efficient as possible. So I started up some rice in the Instant Pot, got that going so it would be underway and kind of ready when I was ready to use it in some meals. This second day I was working mostly on dinners. I did do one more breakfast recipe, but primarily I was trying to get as many dinners prepped and in the freezer as possible. So that's just one less thing we have to worry about. Love doing my rice in the Instant Pot, especially if you're kind of doing like a bulk cook like this, and I'll do it in either bone broth or any sort of broth, chicken, vegetable, beef, anything like that. Just gives it a little bit more flavor and a little bit more nutrition, which I think is great. Any way to, add a little bit more nutrients, a little bit more flavor is always a good idea in my opinion. So that's the way I'm doing my rice today. And that's the way I do my rice a lot. Maybe not always on the average weeknight, but when I have the time to get it all started. I am doing some freezer breakfast meals. I actually got my real compost bucket out today instead of just a bowl. So I'm cracking a whole bunch of eggs. I've made this meal before, or made these freezer breakfast meals before on my channel. They're freezer breakfast sandwiches, really, really good, really, really easy. And it's just nice to have them in the freezer for busy mornings. So cracked a whole bunch of eggs. Wash my hands after cracking the eggs, always. You just scramble. It's really the easiest recipe. You just scramble up like a dozen eggs or so, never mind. I can't talk. Pregnancy brain is a thing, if anyone's wondering. You mix up a whole bunch of eggs like you're going to scramble them, and then you're actually going to bake them in the oven, which is the easiest way to do this, and then cut them up and put them on the breakfast sandwiches. So that's what I'm prepping right now, is the eggs that will be baked in the oven to be used essentially as scrambled eggs on the breakfast sandwiches. I promise I can talk. You also might notice I'm a little bit out of breath because, again, pregnancy and a big old baby has taken up all the room that my lungs usually have, so bear with me. I am trying not to huff and puff on this video as much as I can. All right, so I'm just gonna spray out. I use just a glass baking dish, spray it good. I use avocado oil and then dump those eggs right in there, and then that is what is gonna go in the oven. And it bakes for, I believe, about 25 minutes. I always clean off my workstation after eggs because sometimes you drip a little bit of egg white somewhere while you're cracking eggs and things, and I just like a clean workstation. I also have a little notebook there, which is how I was kind of keeping track of what all I needed to cook in what order. So I'm getting started on some of the dinners with just browning a whole pile of ground beef. We buy all of our beef in bulk. We split a whole cow with some family members, so we usually get about a quarter to a third of the cow that we keep in a freezer in the basement. So I've always got a ton of beef, and especially ground beef, on hand, and I cook with it a lot. You get a lot of nutrients out of red meat, so a little bit goes a long way, and it's also the thing I'm probably honestly the most comfortable cooking is beef versus chicken and pork, but I am trying to be a little better about diversifying our menus. So I'm just gonna get that beef broken up. I'm doing a couple pounds at a time, so it's gonna take a while to cook down and brown up, and then I will drain it and just kind of have it on hand to stick in the different recipes that I'm making today. Oven's preheated, so in go the eggs. I love my new oven. The timer works so much better than my old oven, and it's just been so nice to use. And also having that lower profile microwave that doesn't come down as far. I have so much extra cooking space on my stovetop, and I just don't feel like I'm just like working in a little cave. It was such a small amount of space. That microwave dropped so low. So I've been absolutely loving the new setup. So while all of that beef is cooking, you saw I got down another pan to kind of break the meat up into two containers so that it would cook faster. I'm gonna get some cheese shredded. When I have the time, I really prefer to shred my cheese fresh. It tastes so much better, it melts so much better, but it is a lot of extra work, and a lot of times I just reach for pre-shredded cheese out of convenience because my time is important. I am doing it in the food processor, so it's gonna be a little less shredded and more of a crumble, kind of like the carrots were that we talked about earlier, but it still gets the job done. And for the recipes that I'm using all of this cheese in, that's going to be perfectly fine because it's just going in recipes to be melted down or melted on top of whatever the item is. So shredding up a whole bunch of cheddar, and then I'm going to shred up a whole bunch of mozzarella, and that should get me through most of the recipes. I might have to shred some later too. And I will say in advance, the recipes I'm making are not fancy. They are just simple, easy recipes that will feed our little family, will be comforting, will be good, and will be better tasting and better nutrition-wise for us than reaching for takeout or reaching for convenience items. So that was my only goal, not to be a gourmet chef or anything. And I did do some different things to make this whole bulk cooking process easier that maybe I wouldn't do if I was doing a smaller batch of cooking. That's my meat drainer. I will link it below. That is probably one of the top 3 most used items in my entire kitchen. Absolutely love it, and it drains so much grease off. It is so disgusting how much fat you can get off of your meat when you do this process. It just baffles me. But I'm putting more meat in while that's draining, more gets to cooking, and we'll have, I think I ended up browning up like 6 or 7 pounds of ground beef for all the different recipes that I was doing. rice is done in the Instant Pot. So you can kind of see how I'm bouncing between a lot of different recipe elements and ingredients just to get them all prepped before I start actually assembling anything. Because if I was to prep and assemble one by one, it would take forever. But by prepping multiple different items in bulk and then assembling the different dinners that have like ingredients, look at all that disgusting grease, I can assemble everything a lot faster. I can be a lot more efficient in my cooking process and get a lot more done in a shorter period of time, which is great because I'm super pregnant and I do not want to be on my feet any longer than I have to, and especially not in the kitchen any longer than I have to be. All right, so eggs are out. Be able to assemble my breakfast sandwiches in just a moment. Check and make sure that they are done, which they are. Just basically scrambled eggs, just done the easiest possible way. And they also then hold together really nicely on the sandwich. Double checking on my ground beef again, make sure all that's cooking up good and not burning. So to assemble the breakfast sandwiches, I just cut it into however many squares of egg that I need. And then whatever your bread of choice is, I'm using English muffins for this today. I've also used croissants before, which I really like doing croissants. I just didn't get to Costco to get the ones that I like for this video and for this freezer prep. But I've also done buns, and I don't really like to do bread, but in a pinch I will. So prep all of your bread. I'm just going to use some cheddar cheese too. I'm going to plop each piece of egg on its respective sandwich, top it with cheese, get the bread topper, the top part of the English muffin on there, and then they just go into bags to go into the freezer. It's literally so easy. I'm not just doing this for postpartum freezer meal prep. I do this all year round to have really easy on the go but healthy, nutritious breakfast for when I'm leaving to go to work or just a busy morning when we have other things going on. My husband loves them because he's always leaving for work super early and definitely does not have time to make himself a whole breakfast before he leaves for his job. So this is just a fantastic recipe and a go-to way to prep some healthy meals for our family that I do all the time. And it's going to be fantastic for postpartum because yeah, mornings are probably going to look very, very, very different moving forward. I don't even really know. I store them in this little basket because it's just kind of an easy place to grab them in the freezer, and then they don't get lost in the freezer because otherwise they can get kind of shoved behind things really easily. So I just put that right in my deep freezer. So this is my stack of recipes that I was making. So I'm kind of looking through and making sure that I'm on track with everything that I need to get prepped and ready to go for all the recipes that I'm doing. One of the recipes I'm doing needed some noodles, so I'm going to get those started so that I can get that first couple sets of recipes assembled. So I'm just using 2 of my Dutch ovens to boil some water, get some pasta underway. I think I'm using egg noodles first in the recipes, and then I use some other kind of noodles in some of the other dinners as well. My rice is done. Pull that over. So I'm going to assemble one of the first meals, which is a chicken and rice casserole. So in goes the rice, which should have a really nice flavor thanks to that chicken bone broth. I'm breaking one of my own rules. I normally make all of my cream of soups from scratch, but when I was doing this amount of cooking, I needed it to be easy. So I just got the cans at the store, and it's okay. 80-20, if you do something good 80% of the time, the 20% just isn't going to matter that much. And when we're talking about postpartum meal prep, you just got to make it easy and not overcomplicate it and overstress yourself out about it because 1, I'm pregnant, I've only just got so much energy in me, and 2, it's still going to be a healthier meal than if I were to go run out and get McDonald's because I didn't have anything prepped and ready and I was too tired to cook. So this is still the better alternative, even though it's not a perfect alternative. And I think it's really important to remember that everything doesn't have to be perfect all the time to be a healthy person and to live a more natural, healthy lifestyle. Anyway, I will get off my soapbox now. Back to the recipe. I got some pre-shredded chicken at Costco because, again, I'm trying to make my life easy, and I didn't want to cook up a whole bunch of chicken, and we actually honestly don't have that much chicken breast meat left in our freezer from our homegrown chickens, so I'm trying to save it for other meals. So I let Costco do a little cooking for me, and that's just perfectly okay. The Costco chickens are really good, so I'm not worried about it. So this was broccoli, I'm just using frozen bags of broccoli. Then it was the rice. It's going to have the chicken in it, the cream of soup. I added some more of the chicken bone broth just to liquefy it up a little bit, and some seasonings. Super simple, but it's going to feed us. It's going to be yummy. It's going to be easy on my stomach, especially if I'm having any issues kind of as I come out of, as I'm in postpartum. I know sometimes you can just be a little extra sensitive then. So I wanted just some nice, simple, easy meals that were probably leaning a little bit on the bland side, which this one is. My hands were super slippery, which was making this really hard to get into the containers. I kept almost dropping the glass bowl, which is also probably because I feel like you get so clumsy at the end of pregnancy, and I just drop things left and right, it seems like. I'm amazed I didn't actually drop and break anything while I was doing all of this cooking. So I just spread everything out on top of the frozen broccoli. Kind of mix it together. Granted, it will all melt and mix as it cooks as well, so it doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. Wash my gross hands in my beautiful new farmhouse sink that I'm absolutely obsessed with. Especially on a cooking day like this, I was so thankful for that extra space and having just the one big basin. It just made everything so much easier. In the back there, I'm doing egg noodles, which will be for the next recipe that I'm going to make. Again, I was trying to just be as efficient as possible and have kind of multiple things cooking and prepping for whatever was coming next as I was going, so that I didn't have a ton of stalled downtime at any point in the process. Topping those with some of my crumbled cheddar cheese that we did in the food processor already. And then they will be ready for the freezer. Get my giant foil roll. I got this at Sam's Club, and it's huge. It's a little obnoxious to use because it is so big, but it is a great price for that amount of foil, so I did opt for it this time because I knew I was going to be doing all of this freezer meal prep, and I just wanted to have a lot on hand and make sure that I wasn't going to run out. I wrap them really good. I'm also going to double foil wrap them just to make sure that it's as sealed against freezer burn as I can possibly get it. But since these are going to get consumed relatively quickly, I'm not super worried about freezer burn because, they just shouldn't be in the freezer for more than a month or two is kind of what I'm anticipating. I wrote on the top what the recipe was, that it was chicken and rice casserole, and then what the cooking instructions were, which was 350 at 45 minutes. And then those are ready to go downstairs to one of the deep freezers. And I am on to the next recipe. So the next recipe I'm making is a chicken noodle casserole, basically. Another really simple one with super simple ingredients. Doing some frozen mixed veggies, and then more of my cheating, lazy cream of chicken soup that I normally wouldn't use. But again, 80-20, we're doing the best we can, and also trying not to kill ourselves making all of these meals. So I'm going to be okay with it. Dumped in the last of my cheddar cheese. And then the chicken. which I had to keep breaking it up a little bit. I thought it was more shredded. The last time I got it, I feel like it was more shredded. This time it was in bigger chunks, but it doesn't matter. It still was easier than trying to cook a bunch of my own chicken, and also I just didn't have that much. I didn't probably have enough breasts left to be able to do the amount of chicken that I needed, so thank you, Costco. You can see my noodles in the back are boiling away. Those should be ready any second. They are going into this recipe as well, the egg noodles. Bring everything together. It's a little hard with the frozen vegetables in there. It kind of cools the rest of it down and was a little bit hard to work together. I also needed another can of cream of chicken. It wasn't quite liquid enough. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect because this is all going to cook and mix together once it's actually in the oven. Some seasonings, garlic and onion powder. I put those in almost every recipe I make ever because they make everything better. So I'm just going to scoop my noodles right out into the casserole dish, and then I'll add everything else in and kind of mix it up in the casserole dish because that was just a little bit easier than trying to get everything in a bowl. Honestly, I didn't really have a bowl big enough for the amount of food that would have been to try to fully mix together, so this was kind of my workaround for that. And the hot noodles are also going to kind of soften up the mixture, which helps me to mix it together once it all kind of sits there for a second. Starts to really come together, kind of just warms everything up, and then it mixes a lot easier and it looks really good. It looks like just comfort food beyond comfort food. It's a newer recipe to me. A friend of mine recommended it and I like everything that's in it, so I feel very confident that I will very much enjoy this recipe. And after making it and cooking it and looking at it, it looked really good. Using up just the last little bit of noodles that I have. It's always kind of hard to guesstimate as you're pulling everything together because you don't want to make the first casserole with too much and not have enough left for the other one. So I always err a little bit on the side of using less, and then I can always add it in later on in the process and, even things out on the other end. Another little bit of a mix, and these should be pretty much ready to go. Just a little bit more liquid, just some chicken broth. They're feeling just a little thick. And I don't want the noodles to dry out, so I always err a little bit on the side of a little bit more liquid in a dish like this that is kind of noodle heavy. Back out with my giant roll of aluminum foil to double wrap these, and they will be then ready for the freezer. So that is 4 meals down now, if anyone is counting. Well, 4 dinner meals down, and then there were multiple breakfast items as well. So we're making progress. And yes, if you're wondering, doing a big kitchen meal prep like this, freezer meal prep, your kitchen will be an absolute mess. I tried really hard not to make it a mess, and it was still a mess. So just accept that and plan on having a big old cleaning session when it's all said and done. Get my instructions written on those, and then we have 2 more meals ready to go to the freezer. Moving right along, I'm going to start some of the ground beef recipes. So I am opening a giant thing of tomato sauce. I was able to get the big thing since I was cooking in bulk, which was a lot more cost effective. Fun little tip there. Mixing in some of my ground beef with that tomato sauce. And then starting in with some seasonings as well. These are kind of my go-tos: onion powder, garlic powder, salt, pepper. I also tend to use a lot of paprika, chili powder, cumin, and just kind of staples like that, Italian seasoning, stuff like that. I'm not the fanciest person in the world, and I probably don't have the best understanding of what seasonings give different flavors and things like that. So I just stick to my basics and it works out just fine. I had more noodles going in the back, so I'm going to get those drained. And yes, I reused my pasta water because all that has been in it is pasta. So I reused the pasta water from the first set of noodles. This set of noodles, I did dump it, but you can usually reuse it at least once without too much trouble, and then it starts to get starchy. These are penne noodles, so I'm making just basically a really easy kind of baked ziti situation. You can see just how easy this recipe is. Like, I've used 3 ingredients roughly, and it will be yummy. It will be simple, but it will still be yummy. It will still feed us, and it will still be healthier than takeout. So that's really all that matters to me. Some of my crumbled mozzarella goes on top. This is probably the easiest recipe I made during the entire day, and this is also just one of my staple go-tos in our house. It's just, you can't beat pasta as a comfort food, and it's so stinking easy. So I believe our count is now up to 6 meals for the freezer, with these 2 baked zitis ready to go in. Get my instructions on the top, and I'll be ready to move on to the next recipe. I was actually kind of amazed when I was going through this process. It didn't take quite as long as I thought it would. I was kind of intimidated, and I did kind of put off doing it because I just thought it was going to be such a monster task. And it was a big task, and it took a couple hours, but I probably started the process at, say, 11 a.m., and I took some breaks in between. You're not seeing that on camera because I cut all of that out, but I took a lunch break. I took some breaks to sit down when something was cooking, different things like that. And I was still done by like 3:30-ish, I think. So it really wasn't too bad. Moving on to my next recipe, which is going to be enchiladas. So I just get some plain tomato sauce in the bottom, and this is really just to prevent sticking. I don't use actual enchilada sauce because I personally do not enjoy a ton of spice. So I prefer to spice it myself and flavor it myself so that I know it's going to be what I like. So that's what I'm doing, and that's why I'm not using actual enchilada sauce, and I'm just using plain tomato sauce and then kind of adjusting it as needed to make it taste the way I want it to taste. Draining some black beans. I put rice beef, beans on my enchiladas. That's just kind of what we like. I don't know if that's the way it's supposed to be if you're making authentic enchiladas, but that's the way that we like it, and it tastes really good, and it gives you just some extra nutrient profile. You're also going to see me change my mind in the middle of this. So normally I roll the enchiladas into the casserole dish, and I started doing that. You can see also I've reverted back to pre-shredded cheese because I had run out of my shredded on demand cheese. So as I'm doing this, I pretty much just realized that was going to be way too much work, and I didn't want to do that. So I'm winging it in the middle, and I'm basically going to do more of like an enchilada lasagna situation where I'm putting a base of the tortillas at the bottom, which I'm using corn tortillas, and then I put all the toppings on that I would normally put in the rolled enchilada and just kind of like did it lasagna style. I don't know how it'll turn out. I think it'll be pretty good. It's basically the same thing. I just adjusted the order and adjusted the format a little bit, and it was a heck of a lot easier to cook. So as long as we like it, this might be how I make enchiladas moving forward. So maybe it'll be a little bit of ingenuity in the moment that actually leads to something we really like more long term. So in goes more of the rice. I had done another round of rice in the Instant Pot in the back. I do try to use brown rice because it's a little bit more nutrient dense, but I also use whatever I have on hand. So I think one of these was brown rice and one was white rice because that's just what I had in my cabinet. All my seasonings went in. Again, using mostly a lot of chili powder went in there by accident. Oops, those ones might be a little spicy. But just using my basic seasonings that I know we enjoy. I get all my seasonings at Costco. That's why the jars are so big. But when you cook from scratch as much as I do, you will go through that much seasoning, and it's a way better deal to do it that way than buying everything in the little tiny containers. More cheese. Always more cheese. When in doubt, more cheese. And then I topped with more of the corn tortillas. Again, it was kind of lasagna style. Hopefully it turns out good. And then I do another can of the tomato sauce that's going to go across the whole top. And if you're doing any bulk cooking like this, these bigger cans of tomato sauce are definitely a money saver to do it that way versus getting a bunch of the little normal size cans. I think those are a 32 ounce can compared to a 15 or 16 ounce can. And it was only the difference of like 30 or 40 cents. So it was definitely a cost saving to do it that way. More cheese. Always more cheese. Two more meals for the freezer. I think that we're up to 8, if I'm counting correctly, which is pretty good. That's 8 dinners I won't have to cook or buy when I have a newborn baby. So that's a huge plus. Moving right along to the next recipe, getting some more water ready to boil more noodles. I did go a little noodle heavy in these recipes, and that's just because it's really filling to have a pasta-based meal. It's very comforting to have a pasta-based meal, and they also lend themselves really well to freezer cooking. So it just kind of made sense to do it that way. Maybe not the healthiest thing in the world, but it made sense for this particular thing. So I'm back to shredding more cheese. I thought maybe I was going to be more excited about shredding it by hand, but I wasn't. So I did do it in the food processor later off camera. Also, you're going to see me start talking in the background. My husband got home from work, so we were chatting with the volume off, so just ignore my face. This is going to be basically like a from scratch hamburger helper. It's really good, and it's really just comforting, yummy, warming food. I love this recipe. So I'm prepping kind of like the sauce right now. I've got a bunch of elbow noodles there ready, as well as the ground beef. So this comes together super easy, and it's so yummy. A lot of times I will do it on the stovetop, and you can do it as kind of like a one-pot meal in a Dutch oven or something like that. This time I'm doing it casserole style, which is different than what I normally do, but for this particular use, it made a lot of sense to do it that way. So heaping scoops of noodles into my containers. Then ground beef. And if you can believe it, I'm still not to the end of my ground beef. That's how much I cooked. I cooked up a lot of ground beef first thing. And then that mixture that I put together, which was a tomato sauce, beef broth with some seasonings, is going to go over the meat and noodles. I had a little spill. And then mix. I do a lot of eyeballing when I'm cooking stuff like this and kind of just see how things look. Lots of cheese. That's what really makes it taste like hamburger helper, is probably all the cheese. It's like the cheeseburger macaroni kind of from scratch recipe. I grew up on so much hamburger helper. It was a staple in our house, and I know it's not the healthiest thing in the world, but to this day, man, hamburger helper just hits right. Which is why I make it from scratch, to make it healthier, but still kind of fill that craving. 2 more dinners for the freezer. If my counting's correct, I believe we're up to 10. Very exciting. That's going to really make our lives easier postpartum with a new baby, and I'm super excited to have all of this in the freezer. It just feels really good, and I have like a little less stress about how we're going to feed ourselves when we're also trying to take care of a newborn as new parents. Also, I will clarify that I refer to us as new parents. I do not refer to us as first-time parents, because we already have 2 children that unfortunately passed. I had preterm labor with our first pregnancy and delivered our twin daughters. They were just too small to survive. So we have children. We are parents. We're hopefully actually going to get to bring our son home. So just a little information about us. And if you're ever talking to someone who has lost children in that way, they are still parents, and please refer to them as such. Back to recipes. This is going to be a baked spaghetti. So tomato base with the last little bit of ground beef. Also ricotta cheese is going to make it super creamy. And then just plain old spaghetti noodles is what I had going on the stove. That's going to be the base of all of this. Again, these are not fancy recipes, but they're going to be yummy. They're going to be good. They're going to feed us. So that's really all I was concerned about. And again, better ingredients than takeout. Though I'm still going to get takeout. That's a no-brainer. I just would like to not have to do it every single day. Again, if anyone is wanting any of these recipes, I'm going to drop links in the description box for either the recipe that I used, if I have access to it, or the closest possible thing that I can find. Again, I flex my recipes around a lot, so it might not be absolutely perfect to what you see me making here, but it should be pretty close. Get everything mixed up together. and that will be our baked spaghetti. Adding a little bit more tomato paste because I thought it was looking just a little not quite tomatoey. We like a really tomato strong sauce, so I wanted to add just a little bit more than actually the recipe I was following called for, because I know that's what we like. And it's totally okay to do that. Flex a recipe to what you and your family like, even if it's not following it perfectly. I have found that recipes I thought maybe I didn't like, if I flex them a little bit, we end up liking, or it just makes it more suited to our tastes. And there's just nothing wrong with that. I'm sure the people who made the recipes don't care at all. Topping it with Parmesan cheese. I ran out of my good Parmesan cheese from Costco, so back to the normal Parmesan cheese, but still tastes the same and gets the job done, even if it didn't want to come out of the container. So this baked spaghetti is the last recipe that I did. So to recap, I did 2 rounds of breakfast muffins, carrot and pumpkin. Then I did breakfast sandwiches. Then I did 4 chicken-based meals. I had the chicken and rice and then the chicken noodle casserole. Then I did the enchiladas, the baked ziti, the hamburger helper, and then now the baked spaghetti. And because I did 2 of each of them, it ended up being, if my counting is correct, I believe it was 12 total meals that I am not going to have to make postpartum, and I can just pull out of the freezer, pop in the oven, and go, as well as a whole bunch of breakfasts. And also I'll use the muffins as snacks for me when I'm adapting to being a mom and taking care of our newborn and just trying to soak up every bit of that stage. So I hope this was inspiring. I hope it was helpful and gave you some ideas if you're looking for freezer meal ideas or ideas for postpartum. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.